quote, serious trouble. But I think that we really need to underscore here the fact that the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, is openly suggesting that Democratic lawmakers would otherwise face death for their treasonous, seditious activities, according to him, is you could say stunning if it weren't for the fact that he said this just 2 years ago about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley. And back in 2023, he had suggested that Mark Milley was a traitor, and that it's similar in the way that he framed this, that in another era he would have faced death. And I asked him about that in 2023, those remarks, and whether he actually meant death and why would he suggest that. And he completely sidestepped 3 different efforts by myself to get him to explicitly say, no, I know that that is extreme language. And what you are seeing is the president actively reposting on social media the suggestion that these lawmakers could even face hangings. And I think that this is important, not just from the fact that it's the top executive of the United States, but even more so, the fact is, you know, having traveled the country, especially over the last 2 years, I heard repeatedly from Americans on the ground who believed that Democratic government officials deserved to be killed and deserved the death penalty for their actions. And so I know from history that the president's words have great meaning to a great many Americans who take his words very seriously. Whether he takes his own words seriously or not is besides, I think, the point.
Words matter. And, Congressman, these Congress members in that video were clear. They were saying, do not follow illegal orders. As a military member, you take an oath, right? What is that oath, and how does the message we heard from those Democrats line up?
Look, you don't take an oath to a president. You don't take an oath to anything but the Constitution. So what's fascinating about this video is that it wasn't really a statement of opinion. It was a reiteration of a pledge that all service members understand that they take. Now, the president had an opportunity in response to this video to say, everything I'm doing is legal. That would have made a lot of sense, right? Rather than turning to heinous statements of political violence. Now, this is not a moment where someone should think, okay, when an order is given, necessarily a service member has to agree with the order. President Bush had the decency, and Dick Cheney, to go to Congress to authorize the war in Iraq, a war that, as a serviceman, I thought was immoral, but it doesn't mean that when you're invading Iraq, you get to deny those orders. This has such an easy solve. You know what it is? Congress doing its job. Congress authorizing the use of military force for these strikes on Venezuela. The president respecting the Constitution and going to Congress to actually authorize the use of military force. None of this would be happening if Congress actually stepped up and honored its role at this very moment. And I think that's what some of my former colleagues were speaking to there.
Well, and we spoke with Chrissy Houlihan last hour, who was one of those Congress members in the video, and they didn't specify any particular actions that they believe this administration's taken. That is illegal. They, as you point out, were just speaking the facts of what every service member should be doing, and that is following the law. Sarah, you worked in the first Trump administration. What is your reaction to how the Trump administration is handling this, the president specifically, and what does it say about the state of our politics right now?
Yeah, I think the gaslighting coming from this administration is mind-boggling, but not surprising. Watching the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, and others defend this is absolutely insane to me. I mean, if this was any other president, we would be having conversations about the 25th Amendment if they were calling for the opposing party, members of the opposing party, to be hanged. And instead, she flips this over on how, well, they're inciting violence. And to me, it looks like the president is the one very clearly inciting violence here. And we've had a lot of conversations recently in the state of our politics, and especially in the aftermath of the horrific death of Charlie Kirk, about the need to tone down the rhetoric in this country and dial it back. But instead, the president is the one who keeps continuing to just ratchet it up. And I think that it's really shameful when you look at the Republican lawmakers. You played some clips of their responses and them sane-washing this, and they say, oh, well, yeah, he shouldn't have done that. No, you should be very clearly condemning this, and no matter what party you're on or what party you're a part of. And so it really does speak to how we are so divided as a country and how Trump has just normalized this type of rhetoric and desensitized us as Americans that this is acceptable, because it's not.
Yeah, Speaker Johnson wasn't in those clips, but we did play his remarks earlier in our last hour, and he actually defended the president and took issue with the video from those Democratic lawmakers, saying what they said in that video was wildly inappropriate, saying it was beyond the pale for them to put out that interview, or that video, I should say. Other Republicans